Hello, lovelies, and welcome to another edition of Hold My Latte 2022. Today I am continuing with the Character Randomizer short story series that I have done with writer Sam Wicker on her channel on the last Sunday of every month. June was just a tight month. It was only Sam and I, and so she just posted her video reading of the story of Bjorn Farmer, and now I am going to be reading the story, or the continuation of the story, with Missie, the kind of neurotic cursed pixie. I'm just always getting these characters. Let's begin. After Bjorn finished reading from the strange-smelling spellbook, there was a pop like a balloon, followed by a sizzling sound like eggs in butter. She could almost see the glow of the spells fading. Missie peeked out of the darkness of the vent at the blue elf as he looked in the vent at her. Touch only the things in this room. This room. Got it? Cringing at the reprimand, Missie followed meekly, her mind coming up with all kinds of snarky things to say, but she only hummed in agreement. She wasn't called Loser Missie without reason. Though she had earned her rank as master thief, she had been cursed by a witch, and now her greedy nature meant the uncontrollable draw toward shiny things, worse than a magpie's. She would suddenly find herself stealing things she had no business attempting to steal. Only Bjorn would work with her any more, because she got caught half the time since she was cursed. Since they were young teens in the orphanage of Brave, her best friend Bjorn often painted her to look like a statuette, or stone, or wood, or whatever the walls of the place they were robbing looked like. He wasn't an orphan, but his mother oversaw the orphanage for those who survived the great fire of the Crownery Forest. Stealing got them out of his mother's reach and the reach of her ever-present dish towel. Was it really a dish towel if it was used as a whip and never touched a dish? Missie wondered. They both wanted out of the thieves' way, but no one hired pixies for anything safe. And though Bjorn had many skills and much magic, he lost his respectable jobs every third moon, and they ended up thieving again. She wondered what happened with Madame Melou yesterday, that Bjorn came to find her, and why they had to do this job right away. She was grateful he hadn't painted her before they came, because she would have itched the whole time they were sneaking through the pipes and vents. Oh, the hours she spent standing perfectly still so he could apply the paint to make her almost invisible. But now, if it was true, she could be invisible with only one coat. Obediently she followed, stopping when he did. Her tiny dark eyes quickly catalogued everything in the room beyond the blue elf's rusty man bun. Most of the displays were filled with old magic trinkets, items worth nothing in the middle market unless she found a collector. She wondered what the behind-market potion vendor wanted from this room to pay their room and board for a few months at least. Standing behind the tall cases, Bjorn muttered, "Wouldn't happen to have a letter in your back pocket, would you?" She shook her head, glancing around and toward the long hall that the room was adjacent to. In quick, twitching motions, she eyed him suspiciously, because 200 coins seemed like too little to steal from the 3rd Street Museum of Antiquities and risk her freedom. But the book Bjorn brought contained the spells to dissolve the security magic, so she was hopeful they could escape undetected. Her wings twitched. It made her nervous to be in the open, and she looked left and right in quick, jerking motions like a bird watching for a cat. A guard could come from either direction at any time. If she was caught, It would be her 11th offense, and she would spend the rest of her life sealed in a tube pushing bottles through the city's messaging system, or working inside of an iron machine while it was running, or worse, have her wings clipped and be used as mermaid or white rabbit bait. Duh! Bourne's not-so-quiet exclamation startled her, and she wanted to squawk at him to be quiet as he lowered a shelf holding an ornately trimmed bottle. The silver and green trim was pretty, but the rainbow-swirling potion was mesmerizing against the potion bottle's black velvet tray. She could feel her hands start to itch to hold it, to keep it, to hoard it away. Get ready to get painted up and not be a loser anymore. Teasing her about her surname, the orphanage gave her in the territory of the clan of Brave, Bjorn was already pulling out his bundle of painting tools from his coat pocket. Missie! Missie! Focus! You're going to paint me here? Looking at him with narrowed eyes, Missie's voice trilled like a hummingbird's. Where anyone might walk by and see? Yes. Don't worry. In a few moments, no one will see you. Then you can get us some real treasure we can sell. No one visits this wing, so we can filch it and be gone before anyone notices. He led her to the hall and peeked around the corner at the things in the next room with her as he revealed. Nothing in that room can touch the floor, but there is a designer from the middle market who still lets me glamorize his toes and fingers. When I work on his bunions, he claims the princess will pay a king's ransom for a dress decorated in dragon scales and Pegasus feathers. He was just looking for a supplier. We get those, and I can get my job at the palace back, and you can live in the gardens. Missie stared at the large urns filled with floating scales and hovering feathers, but her eyes latched onto something resting in the corner on its own grand pedestal. An egg covered in jewels. It was larger than she was by many times, but it was so shiny. She shook her head and clenched her fist to keep from reaching for it. Bjorn dragged her away from the hall, hiding them behind the potion display. Hold out your hands and take off your bootlets, my darling Pixie, Bjorn insisted as he waved a paintbrush. The 200 coins for the job won't pay as much rent, and snatching the scales and feathers from the floating magic room will be set up for a year. Hurry up. She started to pull off her tunic, but he snapped at her in an almost gentlemanly way. No, just your fingertips and toes, so you don't leave prints. The wizard who hired us said this will make you invisible, and allowed me 5 ounces to take whatever else we wanted. But we won't get greedy, not this time. Only something that can be replaced, and then we'll have some time to not. He paused, scowled, clearly seeing the broken links of her fingernails and the claw-like state of her toenails. Missie, Missie, your feet look like a sparrow's. You should have come to me to trim them sooner. You were working for Madame Milou. I don't want to bother you. I couldn't pay you, Missie murmured. Scowling, he patted her raven-colored, ombre rainbow shimmering hair. I will always take care of you. Missie stood very still, trying not to think about the glittery dragon egg as Bjorn painted first her hands and then her feet. As she beat her wings like a hummingbird's. Hovering, she flitted back and forth, and Bjorn gasped. That crazy old fool wasn't lying. I can't see you. He pulled out a bag and unrolled it. Quickly, get the feathers first. Missie shot into the room and began gathering the floating feathers, but by the second trip, she started to feel lightheaded. On the third trip, when Bjorn sneezed at the feathers, she giggled. On the fourth trip, she flew loop-de-loops as she brought the last of the feathers to him. This is fun, her voice purred. Missy, are you okay? Bjorn asked in concern as she giggled. He turned his head this way and that, trying to find her by the sound of her wings. A moment later, an armful of dragon scales sprinkled him like rain falling up. With Missy's giggle, hurrying to gather them in a second bag, he turned his head to and fro, trying to see her. Missy, here, take the bag and just put the scales in it. It's enchanted. He held up the bag, and it was snatched away. She started singing in the language of the Fae. It sounded like birds on a spring morning. Surely the guards would come to investigate because it was midwinter. Shh! Stop singing! No, no! Bjorn hissed at her as he watched the sack being stretched and tugged over the petrified dragon egg. Leave it! It was like watching someone trying to put a large watermelon in a sock. Missy! As soon as the mouth of the bag reached the bottom of the egg, the bag swallowed it and shrank back down to the size of something a blue elf could carry. The bag floated away from him in a spiral like a corkscrew. Come back! We have to go, Missy! Missy! Bjorn begged quietly. He was beginning to sweat because something was very wrong, something more than the curse. All he could do was watch the bag fly around the corner toward the treasure rooms. Shaking his head, he looked at the potion bottle and the bag of Pegasus feathers. He couldn't get caught here, not with these things. Going back to the vent, Bjorn hesitated, holding up the grate, and watched as shouting came from the distance. The bag suddenly appeared around the corner and collided with a display of wizard staffs that fell across the hall floor. 2 burly guards tripped on them, rolling over each other, as a third upended and landed on his head quite comically. The bag crashed into the wall next to the vent. Slinging it over his shoulder, Bjorn felt for the invisible Pixie and dragged her into the vent before pulling the grate back in place. He whispered a charm to seal it as the guards shouted to their fellows. Their voices covered the chime of the spell working. Panting in relief, he picked up the bags, shrunk them to fit on his back, then carried his friend away. As they traveled through the pipes into the sewer, Missie muttered nonsensical questions. Bjorn, is there mead in that potion? I think there is. Why do I feel like I fell in the mead at the Orc's head? Why is the air sideways or curly so my wings don't work right? Missie, what else did you put in the bag with the dragon scales? Bjorn asked fearfully as he emerged into the Trader's Bay swamp from a sewer drain pipe. She didn't answer. Her head fell against his shoulder again. He needed to get to Thanet and find out how to get the paint off the Pixie. After getting a strange look from a dwarf walking a pug, he realized he was holding his arms like he was carrying a small child, but they couldn't see her. He folded his hands together, hoping that it looked less strange as he hurried to the behind market. The sour, salted stench of the behind market assaulted his nose, so he ducked his head and smelled Missy's hair, grateful that pixies always smelled of some kind of flower. There were city guards and king's guards and even 2 of the museum guards rushing about, but none noticed him as he walked under the edge of a cart on the inside of the wheel because he was so small. He ducked into the alley that held the potion maker's home. Unable to knock, he kicked it several times. A peephole window opened at the top, so Bjorn kicked the door again. A second opened in the middle of the door, then one just above his head. Thanet, damn it, open the door! Bjorn hissed through his face covering. The cat-sized door opened and he rushed in. The old wizard hobbled over and sat on the table. The pungent smell of rotting cheese and feet almost made Bjorn gag and run back out. But he needed the money, and he needed to know how to get the paint off Missie. He inhaled deeply of her hair, then said, "We got it. Where is our coins?" "What did you get?" The old wizard looked at him as if confused. "We got the potion you wanted, but it made Missie sick. How do I get it off her?" When the wizard didn't answer, Bjorn demanded again, loudly, "Did you not hear me?" Missie groaned in his arms and squirmed. He set her on her feet, but held onto her arm, lest he lose her again. "I'm going to be sick. I'm so drunk." Bending over, Missie vomited glowing rainbow bubbles, but Bjorn didn't dare let go of the invisible Pixie's arm. "Take your potion and tell me how to get the paint off her hands and feet," Bjorn demanded. Then he noticed the way Thanet kept looking toward the cloth-covered door. "I don't know what you're talking about," the old wizard announced as he stuck his rotting feet back into a cauldron of salted water. Bjorn backed toward the door, pulling the swaying Missie with him. "What's going on?" "Looks like the old wizard gave you up, little smurf. Is that another one of you or something else?" Another wizard sneered at him in the derogatory language as two guards stepped from behind the curtain. Bjorn rushed back out the door, dragging Missie. "I won't go back in the jar," Missie cried. Suddenly, she wrenched free of his grasp. "And they can't have my eggs!" Startled at being abandoned, Bjorn almost called out her name, but then he felt her grab him around the wrist, and then he was flying. He didn't think she was that strong, and then realized the feathers and scales must be helping her. He bit his hand to keep from screaming out in terror as the inebriated Pixie carried him from the alley, while the guards and wizard chased after them. Magic crackled and flew past him, exploding a broken street lamp, but she swerved, and they almost careened into a building before shooting out across the train yard. Looking down, he saw the train cars on the track only a few feet below. A train was coming and cut off the pursuing wizard and guards. "Go left now," he ordered quickly, as she weaved back and forth toward the well-lit part of Middle Market like a moth toward a flame, while she sang the song of a nightingale and giggled. "Go right now! Lower! Lower! Land there!" he encouraged her harshly. They tumbled across the landscape bit of yard. Bjorn got up quickly and felt around in the grass until he found Missie. She was giggling again. "Missie, are you okay?" The lamps are singing to me." Shaking his head, he picked her up and carried her to the designer who wanted the dragon scales and Pegasus feathers. No one was home, so he crawled through the cat door. Laying Missie on a fluffy bath mat, he found the nail paint remover he had left on his previous visit, and began to wash her hands and feet by touch. Soon she reappeared, but she curled in a tiny winged ball and slept. Unable to sleep, Bjorn opened the bag and began to take out everything she stole from the 3rd Street Museum. Opening the book Wizard Thanet gave him, he touched each piece to remove the tracking magic. Then he put his hand on the wooden cabinet, creating a piece of paper as gold lettering appeared. When his inventory was complete, he put all the feathers and most of the dragon scales in one bag, then everything else in the other. It was no surprise to him that everyone was looking for them. Sighing, he went to look for food and a stiff drink. He and Missie would be hunted for the rest of their lives. By morning, he woke her up. Before morning, he woke her up. "Missie, we have to go soon." "I feel strange," she slurred, then squinted at him. You're my best friend. You'll be my best friend always, right? Yes, yes, I will be your best friend always, Bjorn promised. He put her foot in his lap and began working on her bird-like toenails. I can still feel it. She laid back with her wings spread. Feel what? The paint. I can still feel it on my hands and feet. It tingles and it makes me silly. But I forgot my egg. I got all my eggs. And I'm going to find a big tree near a meadow and make a nest out of vines and flowers and feathers and put them all in there. And no more living in a wall like a titmouse or house finch. As she rambled on and on about her eggs and the nest she wanted to build, Bjorn worked on her feet with regret, thinking she became more bird-like with every passing season since she was cursed. Her hairs were becoming darker, like a raven's, and her movements were becoming more bird-like. It was his fault. There was a noise downstairs, so he pulled her to her feet. Hide. I'm going to see if I can sell the Pegasus feathers and dragon scales. Then we'll leave the city, Bjorn announced. We'll find a lovely meadow and a large tree for your nest and eggs. What about your nail salon? What about all the feet? Missie mumbled stupidly as he tied the second bag to her tunic with his belt. Everyone everywhere needs someone to do their feet and hand care. Then he worriedly smiled, insisting, If they catch me, I am certain the prisoners of the king's dungeon will appreciate my talent. But you must run away. Missie suddenly wailed loudly in the tones of a screeching seagull. I don't want you to go to prison. What are you doing here? A startled vampire with slicked back hair demanded. Bjorn smiled at him. Good sir, hello. To be honest, about everything, I found a way to acquire the feathers and scales you are seeking, and I am happy to have been of service. Shall we barter on the price now? Bjorn pulled the bag out onto the floor since he was too short to reach a table. The scales and feathers floated upward. Those are Pegasus feathers and dragon scales, the vampire gasped. But how? We stole them with my eggs, Missie revealed in chirping words. Hush, Bjorn warned her as the vampire demanded. You what them? My apologies. Her vampire is very poor. She said we stole them, Missie enunciated slowly, then giggled. With my eggs. Her giggle made the rest of her words almost unintelligible. We got them from Stolthelm and Withelmeg. Bjorn lied. Stolthelm I know, but Withelmeg? The confused vampire looked doubtful. I didn't know they had flying mysticals in Stolthelm. They don't! Missie blurted out with a high trill and giggle. Missie, shush! Bjorn scolded her. What? He asked. Bjorn, where did you get these? Are you the ones who robbed the Museum of Antiquities last night? Yes, Missie answered, as Bjorn said, No. Looking between them, the vampire frowned. Well, which one is it? Yes or no? Yes. No. Bjorn grabbed Missie by the arm and put his hand over her mouth. Don't listen to her. She's gotten into something that is making her hallucinate. Hallucinating about robbing the museum? Shaking his head, the vampire backed away. You need to leave. I want no part of robbing the museum. I appreciate your help with my bunions, so you can stay until dark, but I won't go to prison for you. And if anyone asks me, I don't know anything. I never met you. Bjorn knew he was stuck, so he said in his most appreciative voice, I am grateful to the small comfort you are offering me and my ill companion. Would you like me to work on your feet while we wait? It is the least I can do. The vampire looked tempted, then shook his head. I'm going to sleep. When I wake, please be gone. He went downstairs to the basement because that's where vampires usually slept. Bjorn turned to Missy, asking, "Missy, why did you tell him we robbed the museum?" Her head twitched as she looked around the room. "Missy, why did you tell him the truth?"
"Because he asked."
She blinked at him, tipping her head in a very bird-like way. She held out her hands.
"It tickles, and I have to tell the truth."
Rubbing his forehead and pulling on his ear, Bjorn considered things. Then he began gathering the scales and feathers he could reach, but many had drifted too high. Missy began flying around the room unsteadily, gathering the floating scales. She gave them back to him. Then she began collecting the Pegasus feathers. Twisting them in a circle, she began braiding them together. The nest floated slightly as the imbued magic of the feathers held it aloft. She curled up in it and went to sleep again. Tiredly, Bjorn climbed in the fluffy bed next to her. It still floated. Suddenly an idea struck him, and he smiled broadly before scrambling out of the downy softness. 3 months later, a traveling trunk arrived and was left on the platform of the train station with all the other mail parcels. No one seemed to notice as the gold letters of the address changed again. Slipping out of a bed of Pegasus feathers Missy made for him, Bjorn watched her fondly fussing over her smaller jeweled eggs. The moonstone-encrusted giant moth egg gave them plenty of light without being warm or harsh. The other eggs kept them warm or cool. Traveling with the comfort of the Pegasus feathers and the dragon scales around them saved them from many knocks and bumps and allowed them to always ride their trunk. It was larger than the holes of the walls where they had both lived for many years. Bjorn slipped out to explore the town and buy some food. He had plenty of time because the next train wasn't for several hours. In the corner of a salon window, he noticed a sign that said, "Help wanted. Must be able to do foot and handwork for clients." Walking past, he almost ignored it. Then he saw the park behind the shop, a large flower-covered meadow surrounded by giant trees. It was the place of Missy's dreams. He turned and went back inside. The proprietor was a Naga, or a Gorgon. He still didn't know the difference, or if they were different species, only that one had a tail and the other had legs. "Hello, good lady. I am here about the job and will happily demonstrate my skills. But first I have one small accommodation to request. I was wondering if I could live in my trunk in the back under your giant redwood tree."
Perhaps we can make a deal. Show me."
The old snake-tailed female drummed her nails for a moment, and Bjorn reached out to take her hand. "Allow me to start with your hands, my dearest lady, and since you don't have feet, I could trim the scale claw on the tip of your tail." He reached into his pocket for his leather roll of tools and put them on the table. Taking them out, he began to work. "You will see that I am a loving assistant who enjoys my job. It is really the profession I enjoy most." 2 hours later, a centaur working for the town guard carried their trunk to the yard behind the shop. He was shocked when Missy flitted out and flew up the tree, twittering like a finch at him as he trotted away with an appointment card for the next day. His new boss, Madame Lilu, tipped her head, watching. "She really does think she's a bird, doesn't she?" "Yes, but she has been my best friend and companion since we were teens. I cannot abandon her," Bjorn explained. "A meadow surrounded by giant trees has been her dream since she was cursed." "And what is your dream?" Madame Lilu asked curiously. Her tones were much softer than his last gargoyle employer, slowly hissing and lulling, and he wondered how old she was. A salon of my own, and a place where the feet don't smell and stink like cheese, Bjorn admitted. There aren't many humans here, so I think we can come to an agreement. Bjorn smiled. Things were finally looking up. The end. So that is the end of my story. I did take a little bit of liberties from the character role, as Sam did, and try to write mine to fit the ending as well as I could. For those who wish to join the next Character Randomizer stream on writer Sam Wicker's channel, it will be on July 24th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for listening. Be blessed and have a very lovely day.